Just answering questions with WAPTech. Let's see how this works. Did a video about flare guns again, what if, and I brought this up before, but not just making a universal receiver, but being creative with barrels by saying the barrel should only be associated with the caliber. You can have a chamber in each end of a barrel, and locking lugs. But anyway, universal lower, nice. Pistol first, versatility to follow. Much like an archer, you'd need a quiver and full of barrels to best utilize said pistol, or have a 22 caliber, let's say magnum at one end, and on the other end of the barrel pointing the other way, have it be long rifle and all the other sizes, or at this end be a 223-556 chamber and just use a AR-15 barrel and bore out the nozzle of it to be for rimfire, and just have it to where you can move the firing pin. Getting the maximum from a platform, no? Yeah, but you can do it in half the number of barrels. And the funny thing is, you can look up another thing called movie ammunition. The blanks that they use in movies are sometimes quasi-universal. They're just basically capable of chambering, they're just noisemakers. Most of the time they're built a lot like a shotgun, where they have a metal version where they clamp the end shut, so it makes a loud noise no matter what. And those can be used as propulsor rounds for any bullet you could throw in first. Warning, cartridge ammunition has to have propellant and a primer. It is not legally required by the ATF that you have a cartridge device that has a propelled object. If you fire a blank, it's still considered ammunition and it's still ATF regulated. The only way to make it not regulated is to have a primer, propellant, and projectile all separate. Any form of anything else, oh wait a minute, you can include propellant in the ass end of a hollow butt, not hollow point bullet, and you can actually muzzle load that. But that's another whole set of videos. I'm looking forward to your future creations. Not my creations, I'm just repeating things. Next thing, how about a tube-fed pump-action revolver with a 26-inch barrel, loads as it ejects. For a double barrel, maybe just run the same side-by-side cylinders, anti-rotating to each other, still dual tube-fed. I actually came up with a method for this, and I got the idea from a tube-fed air gun. It had a transfer elevator that would bring up the cartridge, and then I thought, you can also get little revolvers that are for running these, and also you can make a revolver pulley system to where it has a belt. It's called a chain fed. What happens is the pellets are put in little teeny cylinders, and then it occurred to me you could just put a 6-shot or smaller number, maybe even 3-shot cylinder, and have a tube magazine that feeds exactly the same size. It have to be absolutely regulated. You couldn't have variable lengths like you do with the 22 rimfire, but you could have all of them identical, like let's say, like you're talking about, and have it fall into here. Then it would rotate one of, let's say, 3 or 4 cylinders up, fire it from it, and then when it gets over here, when you pull the trigger, it would eject the shell. It wouldn't have to have any power involved. You'd just be pulling the trigger and rotating it. Your trigger mechanism would rotate just like a revolver, but it would have a longer tube capability, because I'd noticed this. Many old revolvers loaded on one side, and you could just make it to where it had a loading one on side and eject on the other, and it would work just fine. And you could have multiple feed cylinders. This is actually a method someone came up with, but the patent never went anywhere, where it would feed it from the back in a 22 case, because they just put it in the buttstock, where you had 6 cylinders in a set. The top one, you want the top cylinder to be the one you fire from. I always wanted to fire from the bottom for, muzzle flip things, but the top edge makes it where you can line up the sights better. Because the barrel, the necessary component of a barrel being out of a gun, you'd want it up top so you can actually sight something. So for practicality reasons, this is the firing chamber. And you can have multiple loadings, but have just one of them not have a load. It would have an eject function and pop the bullet out. And since you could feed it backwards into it and have it just chamber and push it in and fire it, then this would eliminate a lot of mechanisms, and you'd basically be running a tube magazine feeding a revolver, as many of them as you could stack onto it. I've actually come up with this design about 6 months ago, but never went anywhere with it because I had to learn how revolvers work. I had to relearn. I wanted to find something simple, and I found out, as you might have seen from the video you're commenting under, that there's a flare gun that has only 4 moving parts. And it's a single shot, but it is a double action. Adding the extra action of rotating a cylinder can be done with that mechanism. I'm going to work it out and try to come up with something that's painfully simple and easily diagrammed and doesn't require that you have any patterns. But tube fed pump action, cylinders anti-rotating to each other. Yeah. Also, someone said 2 shots, that's not enough. 1 shot's not enough. Yeah, excuse me. And I agree. That's why I want to do double or quad. Over and under and side by side, quad barrels are actually slightly more functional than doing some triple barrel thing. If you're not aware of this, it's an anecdotal thing, but in cases of dealing with actually being attacked and actually having to respond as a personal defense weapon, having more than 2 shots is extremely useful. But 2 shots is usually what's needed. In cases where you succeed, it's 2 shots, maybe 3, always less than 6. In fact, the number is a very large number of 1 shot to 2 shot. And I also found out, I mentioned it in the video, and it's also at the bottom of the video, 357s have a higher energy muzzle velocity, blah, blah, blah. And also found out that anything other than 22 or 25 caliber is better. Just literally anything above 22 caliber. So basically 30 caliber and higher is preferred, since you're really limited to rim fire below that. And then, of course, there's the obvious 12-gauge shotgun with double-aught buck fires ridiculously well and does exactly what you need it to. And from a video I just did, you can get away with a pistol 12-gauge doing the job. I've seen this done with 410 shotgun pistols that are literally 45 Colts that fire multiple pellets just so that it creates a spread, so you're more likely to hit your target. Not much, but you are more likely. It doesn't spread a foot across, which would be preferred to be able to do this. It's not a scattergun, but you do get a scattergun, a real scattergun effect from a really short, like flare gun length barrel for a 12-gauge. And this is based on something I'm going to explain in a minute. Did the short-barreled 26.5 millimeter flare gun need to be rifled if made? No, at the time it didn't, because what they did is they just used 1-inch water pipe or 1.5 inch pipe to make the flare guns. And mostly they did 4-gauge shotguns that were no longer useful and just demilitarized them and de-weaponized them, and it's just a special case for them. But yes, yeah, the one that's in the picture, the double barrel, it has rifled barrels to fire spin-stabilized flares, literally, because that was actually an idea to get at really high altitude. I explained it before, but if you're going over 500 feet up in the air straight up, you need to actually rifle the thing or it'll start tumbling and it'll lose altitude. And more importantly, the parachute won't open. So for parachute flares, having them spin-stabilized or being fired out of a pretty serious firing level was improvement. But some of them were better off being smooth and some of them were rifled. Good question. Next, anything over 50 caliber, same question. Anything over 50 caliber has to be given a sporting exemption, and anything you can make for a rifle technically can be used technically for a pistol. So that limits it to 60 and 70 caliber. Yeah. 80 caliber is still excluded because nobody made an 80 caliber rifle except for the stopping rifles that are elephant guns that are defined by definition to be basically anti-tank. It's an elephant gun. And they're still the only one that I know of that you can have a rifled barrel for. You cannot have a pistol version of. The Howdaw muzzle loading types, you can. You can also just buy a 12-gauge barrel and convert it over to the dark side and do that. But they want it 26 inches or longer because it's impractical for shotgun. But for self-defense for self-defense purposes, a short barrel is crap. I'm going to get to the ratio. Blunderbusses, etc. All of the older weapons that are made before a certain date are grandfathered in to be legal unless they are an example explicitly stated to exclude. That's why you can get a 12-gauge shotgun pistol if it's a muzzleloader. It can be inline, it can do all those other things. You can buy them. The Diablo does it. But you're better off having rifled if you're going to fire a slug. And again, you can just get a 50 caliber muzzleloader or just a 50 caliber regular pistol. But yeah, good question. Over 50 caliber, it has to have a special exemption. Flare guns are only exempt if you can't fire a projectile that is meant to kill anybody or hurt anybody. It also has weight limits and stuff. And the only one of them that I know that you can make metal and get away with and not have anybody look at you funny is the 1-inch and 1.05 inch flare guns. That's why I'm into them. And the 1.05 will let you take a piece of 3/4 inch pipe, the outer diameter is almost exactly right, shove it in there and temporarily make a shotgun out of it. And yes, you want a 26 inch long barrel. I've had that proven to me. The pellets and slugs come out faster, they're much more controllable, and that's the other thing. If you're firing a weapon, you're responsible for everything that comes out. If the thing has a spread pattern at 3 feet that's 3 feet wide, That means it's coming out at this angle. You don't have control over what you're firing. However, a 1-foot barrel seems to be the minimum length for a 12 gauge, and I'll tell you why. Because it's 12-to-1 or 10-to-1 ratio. 10-to-1 ratio on pistols is actually considered important if they're firing shot. And minimum barrel length, unless you want to over-engineer it, they advise that you make the barrel 10 times longer. So a 1/4-inch diameter 25 caliber or 22 caliber bullet, plus or minus. You want to make it 10 times longer, so 10 times that would be a couple inches. Make it 3 inches and you're good. That's a lot less dangerous and a lot less unpredictable. There's this some sort of ratio. It's only for slugs. But for shotguns, what they found out with people playing around with a Taurus and just making their own 45 caliber 45 Colt, which you can put a 410 shotgun shell into it, just cram it in there. They found out that if they got the barrel twice as long as the shell, because that's more than 10 times the diameter of the thing, because it's 41 caliber is what it's made for, you're able to get away with it being a decent gun. So yeah, there is some sort of limit where if it's shorter than a certain length, you really shouldn't make it. And yeah, the flare gun I have is just at the limit where it would be sensible or safe to fire as an actual real pistol. But it's still sketchy as fuck, not okay. But if you use the really short shells and fire a slug for some fucking reason, they're actually quite useful. Again, the experiment has to be done in situ. And I'm going to get to the actual method for testing 3-inch shotguns. I'm not kidding, there is one. 3-inch after the shotgun shell. One shot won't take one very far. Actually, it can, if it's firing off multiple shots within it. You can get, yes, I'm not kidding about this, flare gun cartridges that shoot burning flare gun material in sequence. They fire 1, 2, 3, 4. They're a Roman candle. That's actually something you can legally get. And that's single trigger pull, multiple projectile, but it's street legal only if it's out of a flare gun. Which means all of a sudden now it's back to anti-personnel stuff. And now we do the pseudo ATF compliant short barrel shotgun. Here's my story. I'm sticking with it. The legal limit mechanically, so something is not considered something, remember, is that it has to have any dimension under 26 inches long. It has to have at least one dimension that's 26 inches long. Let's interpret this. A gun that's 26 inches long but is like really skinny, like that, like your 50 caliber pipe gun or whatever, or the 81 caliber, not really, it's actually 70 some odd caliber shotgun barrel that big. As long as it's 26 inches long, it's not considered concealed. And I found a way around this. Now, it's only useful for one purpose, bench testing ammunition. Here's how you do it. You get a 26-inch across steel plate, drill a hole in it, and weld the barrel pointing into the table. Yeah, I actually found it. I worked with one of these. It's called a bench testing thing. I did it for testing muzzle velocity, and we'd put variable barrels on it. The actual legal barrel is and part of the actual quote-unquote lore, or the serialized device. It had a serial number on it at the place I tested ammunition at. You had interchangeable barrels, but it was bolted down and had a little note on it, and I never read it. But I found out recently, and someone mentioned it in a video, and I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta look that up. But there's no copy of it anywhere. But if you're an ammunition factory, you don't want to have to fire out of barrels all the time. You want to fire a single piece of equipment. That's a serialized piece of equipment. You have an ATF ruling and a federal firearms license for manufacturing ammunition, but they don't tell you the test device. The test device is a 3-inch barreled gun, because the longest barrel you're going to find for most ammunition is about 3 or 4 inches, or whatever the cartridge is, plus 3 inches. You can put a barrel extension on it and test it for that. I remember doing this, but I was doing actually 4-inch barrel day. What it was is it was welded physically down. If you cannot point to the weapon anywhere but where it's safe, downrange into a pit catching pieces, do speed tests, it's not considered a firearm. It's considered a test device. So yeah, I can actually do the flare gun test with real steel barrels and do actual barrel length testing. I just have to build it with a 26-inch across hunk of metal to encumber it so I can't conceal a 3-inch barrel. I have to build a table. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And that's what I found out today, just randomly looking around on the net.